All right, so one of the things we're going to do today in this episode of the Scaling Lab is we're going to be looking at two funnels, the same traffic, completely different futures. Now, this is a hypothetical example. I'm not using exact data. I'm using real benchmarks based on data, but I'm not using real data from funnels. I just want to give a clean, easy example to illustrate two different funnel types that are going on in the marketplace. They're just the most common and the shift kind of away from VSLs. Now, I did mention that we got that private report from Meta that has some data about the shift away from VSLs. We're going to get into that in a minute. Looking at these two types of brands, VSLs tend to be first purchase profitable, but they have refunds, chargebacks, low repeat purchase rate, hard to monetize on the back end because of the customer experience. And building a relationship is a little bit harder because of how you got that purchase, having to make big claims, having to promise that there's going to be this big result, and blanket statements. I know this isn't true for everybody. In general, this is how things kind of work in the VSL marketplace. And those margins can be thin after you have all the refunds and the chargebacks, and you're looking at the lifetime of that customer. You're not getting as much revenue down the line. Whereas LTV-focused brands, they are actually willing to lose on day one. I was listening to some people talk about this recently of literally, I want as low of a possible as I can tolerate based on modeling what I know are my repeat purchase rates, my subscription rates, and the churn rate months over month, and maintaining a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC ratio. So essentially willing to pay 1/3 as CAC of the value of the customer is going to spend with you over the course of the next 12 months or however long your business decides to look at that window. So if you can imagine buying 1,000 customers and still losing money, this is happening to some businesses. Even though money is hitting the bank, over time, you're actually not profitable. And there's plenty of examples on any social platform that you want to talk of gurus talking about once they dove in and really audited the account, the brand wasn't nearly as profitable as they thought they were, and they needed a way higher ROAS or a way lower CAC to make the funnel economics work. So the real threat to VSL funnels in 2025 isn't platforms being more expensive or performance being down. It's really about customer evolution and the refund math and transitioning to a more LTV focused business. Now, I mentioned this in a previous episode, but the kind of old model of a VSL where you could basically just do all B-roll and do a voiceover, and even sometimes you would start interspersing what are effectively PowerPoint slides of just text on screen in between. So it'd be 5 minutes of video and then some text, and then it would start to get more and more spaced out of using fewer and fewer video as you get toward the end of the video. Like, customers are just now educated to the point that that feels scammy and outdated. But VSLs are still winning. And so the main thing that I want to point out here is that the need for trust is elevated. There are so many other brands in the marketplace that are delivering just such a transparent, trustworthy, and comfortable experience that you need to start to move some of that into your VSL marketing. So one thing that I see with the biggest players winning in VSLs right now is using real on-screen talent and authoritative talent. If it's not a real doctor, it's somebody who has some kind of credentials. And the second layer there is people using actors. You can still get away with that, but I think the best way is someone that the audience can verify is a real person. I think 2 years ago was working with somebody who was pretty early to this concept, but they were only working with actors, and they created a persona for the actor, and searches went up as we scaled this funnel for looking for this person who didn't really exist. And so people are out there searching for, hey, is this a real person? Is this a real credentialed doctor? Are they telling me the truth? They want to know that, and that's at their fingertips, and they have every right to go look it up. They can even search faster now with AI. They don't have to go read through a bunch of different articles. They can get a summary from AI pretty quick. Now, that opens up a whole nother can of worms, but in terms of low friction, high trust, you can still sell with a VSL, but it just needs to feel more comfortable, and trust needs to get elevated so that people will still buy from you, which also means less pushing on getting people to buy the highest package they possibly can. So you might see that with some of these funnels, conversion rates are better, but AOVs are a little bit lower. that's a trend that I'm expecting for 2026. We're not going to see $400 AOVs. We're not going to see probably even like the $300, $350 AOVs. There are some categories that still pull that off, and historically they've held pretty firmly around the 300 mark. But industry average right now is around like $250 AOV for VSL funnels, and I think that's going to start moving closer and closer down to 200. And I actually see it with some of our VSL brands that are very forward with a doctor. They've got great authority. They've got a real doctor on the brand, and they don't make outrageous claims. Conversion rates are better than what I see on other VSL funnels, and AOVs are a little bit lower, and they're actually monetizing on the back end quite a bit better, which gets into that other type of funnel. So I just pulled up the meta report, and I've been asked not to share this, but I'm more than willing to talk about the data that I'm seeing in it. I just can't disperse this publicly. But looking at the graph, I'll try to show maybe it blurred out if we can do that. And you can see the clear demarcation. It's essentially down and to the right, where on the left hand, you see red representing spend on VSLs, and blue representing spend. Let's just call it, because at this point it's we'll just say e-commerce, but really there's like 4 or 5 types of different funnels here. And so it's around 70%, and there's even a peak that goes up to about 85%. So 75 to 85% peaking in VSL volume in about April of 2024. And as of October of 2025, that's fallen all the way down to between about 35%. We'll just call it 35% to be fair. So essentially it's lost 50 points of 50 percentage points in terms of where it's at in spending. So it's now only making up about 1/3 of total ad spend dollars for a specific vertical on VSLs. And this is representative of the market. We asked that question, and this is definitely representative of the market. So if you're feeling out there that like, hey, we're getting squeezed, we're advertising with VSLs, and this is really difficult, the platforms are getting more expensive, and like, that's why I'm saying this stuff, is because according to Meta's data, we are currently in a situation where we have less than half of the amount of total spend dollars toward VSLs that we did just a year and a half ago. So what's replacing them? Now, quiz funnels, hybrid pages, and advertorials are definitely what are shining here. We have like traditional PDP, but that was the 4th one that I mentioned. 4 other types of funnels that we're selling with. But I'd like to steer away from that, because advertorials, hybrids, and quiz are like unique destinations, like VSL is, that isn't just the product page. It's not just the offer page. You're consuming something first to get more education before you're making a purchase. So while VSL advertisers are out there fighting for a 1.6 plus ROAS, most of the industry is selling in this other way, that with these other types of funnels that have closer to a 1 ROAS, CPAs under $100, and they're willing to tolerate that because they have the long tail of AOV and they're not concerned about their high AOV. So LTV over AOV. And when customers were surveyed, there were 5 pillars that they noted for like what they're looking for. And these were evaluated by Meta and done through survey, but user experience, building trust, and showing authentic social proof, and transparent pricing, like transparency of the offer. That like is a reflection again of like why a VSL would be in decline, because pricing is obviously held until the end. They don't know exactly what the product is until later. Sometimes the social proof sections of VSLs seem like actors. And then the user experience and flow is what Meta and what the market sees as low quality, because there isn't those previous things before. Now, interestingly enough, one of our clients was actually used as a case study in this report, where previously they were over 90% VSL. And over this past year, we've been shifting them to be more subscription-based and start to warm up their PDP flow and their advertorial flows, and try quizzes and test all these different pages that I mentioned, so that we can get more recurring revenue, long-term subscription customers, and they can build that back end of getting more revenue from repeat purchases and cross-sells. And so now we're all the way up to about 25% of the spend for this brand on e-commerce funnels, and away from, and really this is just one product. I say brand, but to be clear, it's one product, away from VSLs. And so, that's over 5x improvement on how much we have shifted spend towards this type of funnel. And I can tell you that they told us that for 2026, they plan for it to be their main focus. So next year, keep VSLs alive as long as we need to, because they obviously sell. But for this brand and focus, they really want to move. So if we create a side-by-side comparison to really look at this in a real life example, like I said, using the fake data modeled off the benchmarks, we can look at a VSL funnel versus one of these e-commerce funnels. So the VSL funnel is obviously acquisition heavy, it's low trust, it's low LTV. It's low TV is essentially a little bit higher than what the first purchase AOV is. Could actually be lower if we factor in refunds and all that, because if your refunds and your chargebacks actually dictate that there's a drop that exceeds how much you're able to monetize, let's just say 250 AOV, drop $15 because of all those other things, but you monetize $10 on the back end, well, you're actually negative on that. So you would be a 245 LTV where you actually had a 250 front end AOV. I hope all that makes sense. But diving into this example, if we take 1,000 customers at 250 AOV, obviously that's 250,000 in revenue. So refunds, chargebacks, let's assume 10%, chargebacks 1%, that drops it down to 222,500. So we got 1,000 customers and we sell them something at 250 AOV, 250,000 in revenue. 10% refunds, take away 25 grand. 1% chargebacks, take away another 2,500, and what we're left with is net of 222,500. Back-end monetization, add $10 to that LTV over time on those 1,000 customers, 10,000. So we've actually got $232,500 at the end of a 1-year period on that cohort. Now, I would say that those numbers are pretty conservative. Sometimes we see refund rates up to 15%. The chargebacks can actually be higher. You need to keep those under, I'd say 5%, but like really under 3%. So it's really fair to assume that I'm being super conservative here. Cohort quality is just bad. You've got high refunds, low customer satisfaction. Backend LTV is extremely low because everything's focused on getting a high front-end purchase. Customer lifetime is basically just one purchase, maybe, on a small percentage of that cohort, one or maybe two other purchases. And that's how you're able to get that $10 per net customer over a 12-year window. So this can really have an impact on margin. And it means that 100% of your business depends on CPM volatility and conversion rates. And you have to make stronger claims to get conversion rates up because CPMs keep going up and it just makes all your clicks more expensive. And if your conversion rate doesn't go up, then you really are just eating away at your margin. Now let's take a look at the LTV-focused e-commerce funnel. These are low friction, trust first. It's very easy for somebody to make a purchase. And this is where Meta's data said that 80% plus of the market is getting CPAs under $100, where VSLs are around 150. So these CAC numbers are much more favorable. So let's use this same model, 1,000 customers. Let's just say that it's 70 AOV. I think that's super conservative. It's only 70,000 revenue on those front end purchases. Now we've got 20% subscription on that. So there's 200 subscribers that are going to get rebilled next month. 80% are just one-time buyers. First month of rebills usually has a churn spike. So let's say we have a 50% drop off. Hopefully it's lower than that, but again, just trying to be conservative here to some like industry benchmarks of the numbers that people throw out. So then we get into churn. First month usually spikes around 50%, blending data here to just give a fair benchmark. And then the months following are usually around 10% because your first month spikes because you're just churning out those people who only bought subscriptions so that they could get a discount. So subscriber revenue ends up being about 50 grand over time. So, you've got the 70 plus about 50 is about 120. But then the other thing to consider is that usually about 20% of the 800 will buy again. So if we take those 800 and multiply that times the 20%, and let's just say that second person is also $70, you get another 11 grand. Yeah, it ends up being about 130 grand that you got in revenue on month 12. So yeah, okay, like 100 grand less than the VSL advertiser. However, you have more brand equity, you have a better perception in the marketplace. You're not having people rant and rave about you on Reddit and other forums or Trustpilot, your scores are good. And so it actually becomes easier to acquire customers over time because you have people talking about their positive experience with your product. We will also see some organic content popping up online of people talking about your product as well, which also serves as positive representation of your product and increases people's trust in you. Because if somebody looks you up and all they can ever find, like, is this a scam? I don't know if I can trust this. I tried to refund and they wouldn't call me back, or just horror stories that are easy to find online for some advertisers that don't have their customer experience and customer service department built out really well. It's easy to see how that would impact. It's really hard to measure, but it's really easy to interpret the impact that that's going to have over time. Now you're probably thinking, Jairet, you just told me that there's 100,000 more in revenue in the VSL brand. Why wouldn't I do that? I'm here to make money. Well, fair. I know I just went on my soapbox about, brand reputation and all that stuff, but money in the bank is money in the bank. A scenario that I've seen time and time again with VSL offers, when something scales, you might have a lifespan on that of 6 months, 8 months, maybe even 12 months, and the really cream of the crop are around 2 years. But it does die off. And at that point, a lot of offer owners would just be like, yeah, rebrand it. Let's put this thing out in the marketplace again. It obviously converts. The market is there. It's an evergreen market. We just need to reposition this product, change the messaging a little bit, but we can do that again. Fine. I've seen that too. But during that time, the LTV brand is continuing to grow and scale, acquiring customers at a cheaper price and having better back-end metrics because they're optimizing. So they're able to get stronger LTV, stronger AOV. And so over time, and depending on where they're at directionally according to those benchmarks, I tried to be conservative on everything. If you're 5, 10, 15, or even 20% higher than anything that I mentioned there, or maybe even more, you could very easily be looking at having that same amount of revenue or very close to the same amount of revenue with the positive impact that comes down the line. So on year 2, when the VSL brand is looking at generating roughly the same amount of revenue, the other brand has probably got 50% more or maybe even 100% more because of the long tail of that positive brand impact. So that's where it really happens, is just like in investing, it's all about the compound effect. And now I can hear you like, that's Jairet being an alarmist. And I can hear some of you out there thinking that I'm being an alarmist. I'm not here to be an alarmist. I'm here to be a realist. It's a trend that we're seeing inside our agency to a small degree because we do a really thorough job of selecting who we work with. And really all of our funnels are working with doctors. We have a few that are working with actors, and any of the brands that we work with that are VSLs, they're authority driven. And so we're not seeing the same volatility that other people are. I've recently audited some funnels that have VSLs that are still that old kind of ugly VSL model, and their conversion rates are terrible. A lot of people this year just looked at paid media and said, we just can't do it anymore. And if you look deeper in, it's because they haven't adjusted to these higher trust type VSLs that increase conversion rates. So you absolutely still can win with VSLs. You just need to increase the trust and increase how easy it is for somebody to purchase and move through the funnel without feeling this friction and negativity that comes out from some of the older tactics or what we've seen for the past 3 years leading up to 2025 and even longer, really. So it's just a reminder that this is not anti-VSL, just consumers have evolved. They're looking for a better customer experience, purchasing experience. And when things are lower AOV, it's just they're being a little more discerning with their dollars. It's just easier to buy when something is $70 as opposed to spending $250. So again, what this is pro survival. It's not anti-VSL. I want these businesses to survive. And so I'm trying to point out some of the shifts that we're seeing internally at our agency and out in the marketplace that and through the meta data that they delivered in this report that might help you make a decision that can help you win in 2026. Hopefully this message gets to somebody who is thinking in 2025 about giving up, and you can see the future through this message because it makes a little bit more sense. It clicks and you can see how you can potentially shift into the future and bring higher conversion rates, bring lower CAC into your funnel and your business so that you can survive and you're not blindsided further down the road when you just keep trying to do the same thing, wondering why it's not working. So thinking about the tactical takeaways here, run multi-funnel structures. Don't give up on VSLs, but try advertorials going to a product page. Try quizzes going to a bundle, or quizzes going to individual products. Try shorter VSLs. Try what's called the hybrid that might have that shorter VSL in a TSL format. So what you're giving people is the opportunity to consume the content the way they want, to get educated about why they should buy your product. Dial in your upsell flows and not just simply more of the same. Testing different bundles is definitely a surefire way to hopefully increase margin, but also increase AOV. Another thing to test is the subscription upsell. If you give them further discount on the subscription as an upsell and tell them they're locking it in for perpetuity, you're going to get some people that cancel that first month, but you're also going to get a percentage that don't. And over time, that percentage continues to reduce, and you hang on to enough people over time that you're getting them with those rebills, and that is where you're going to make up the LTV. The name of the game here is diversification. You're going to meet different audience segments. You're not going to be circling the drain, as Middle calls it, just going after the same people over and over and over and over. You're going to get those new audience segmentations, diversify better by selling in different ways, and that means better longevity for the scale of your offers. And that means tracking your LTV. Get really clear on your numbers, and shout out to LTV Numbers and Tyler Ryan over at LTV Numbers. If you haven't checked out what they're doing, definitely go take a look. But getting super granular and clear on LTV by product, LTV by funnel, LTV across everything, obviously at the macro level, but in those granular senses as well, is going to help you optimize your funnels. And that's exactly what they're doing over there. So I recommend checking them out, watching their demo video if you haven't already done that. Definitely book a call with Tyler. And I say that not to pitch his software, but some of the stuff that he showed me on how refunds have impacted essentially the LTV curve of VSL first brands is kind of scary, because that example that I gave earlier of that $250 AOV where refunds drop things off, let's say in aggregate $15 to $20, and then you claw back another $10 on your monetization on the back end. Well, that was a real life example from one of the graphs that he showed me in a brand that we were talking about when we were recently together in Mexico. That is case in point, like $250 on the front end, but dipping off $20 and then clawing back 10 means you actually only got $240 when on the front end you got them to spend $250. If you're sticking with VSLs and you just want to sell only with VSLs, you've got to upgrade the quality, upgrade the production quality, upgrade the talent that's in it. I recommend going with a doctor. And if you want to stick with an actor, make sure that you're positioning them the right way, because even if you don't want to go with a doctor, I would say physical therapist, esthetician, like somebody who's adjacent professionally who can present that authority and seem like somebody who has the know-how to be trustworthy, because that's super important for a VSL these days. For tactical takeaways is fixing customer experience. I think not enough VSL brands are focused on the retention side of things. Now, it's mostly call centers that'll do save sell. It's their customer service team that's just fielding requests for refunds, or it's, sending the list of buyers off to an email agency to monetize the back end. So building that out in a more robust way so that people have a better experience and work directly with your brand and aren't feeling like their wallet's being abused is definitely something that I think if you push a little less harder on the front end and you monetize for a longer period of time and make more money on the back end. One thing I'll say is that your funnel needs to feel like a customer experience, not a hostage situation. Those are exact words that I've heard someone say about going through a VSL funnel. If they want to know what it is, they're very excited about the opportunity or about the product or about the promise, but they have to hold on and they just get so frustrated and so pissed off. We've all seen VSL ads with those comments underneath them of just tell me already. That's the hostage situation. So you want to avoid that. In summary, the death of VSLs isn't the death of VSLs in general. It's an industry trend that indicates spend is down on VSLs. The market is moving away from VSLs, and the VSLs that are winning are high trust, authority-driven VSLs. So it's not that you can't win with VSLs, it's as the market needs to shift away from ugly VSLs. Ugly VSLs are dead, and you need to shift towards what I've been describing here. Trust, authority, experience. Those are the new performance levers. You have to think in a longer time horizon if you want to keep winning. It's about LTV and about positive brand experience. If you have any questions about what I've been talking about here today, or you want to debate it, definitely make sure to comment below. One last shout out to Tyler Ryan at LTV Numbers. If you check them out, tell him that Jairet from Tried and True Media sent you. He'll hopefully hook you up. And in closing, let us know what we're doing good with these episodes. We're just getting started on the podcast, so your feedback is super crucial. So those comments below, subscribing, following along, and letting know what you think is super valuable. That's it for today, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode.